Okay guys, we're looking at doing an EGR delete for a D-teq KB300, or it's the 3-litre turbo diesel Isuzu KB5 model. And first thing, obviously take off the cover. You do need to take off the intercooler. So get started with that first. You got the cover comes off with the rubber spots there and these grommets here. Afterwards, take off the bolts. There's 4 of them. Then you'll have it loose. Loosen the clamp that was up here. Take off this boost pipe, and then obviously the same for the other side. And the intercooler is loose, so you should be able to lift it out. That's step number 1. The intercooler is off. Took quite a lot of Q20 spray for the pipes here. This one especially. I worked by loosening the intercooler first, then lifting it off of the brackets after I had taken this one off. That's the first step. Lift the intercooler, then pull and jiggle until it comes out of there. Just make sure your clamp is loosened. Also, this side does have a clamp, so if you wanted to, you could loosen that and rotate this assembly a bit. Next step is taking off the air filter, so make sure you're unplugging your sensors. You got your bolts that hold the box in place. There's another one underneath here, so you're gonna have to probably come from the other side. You'll probably be able to see it better. There is a way to get to it, not that easy though, but yeah, go figure that out. I come from the other side with a spanner. You can fit that in there. I work on the airbox first and foremost. This is difficult, this little pipe here. I actually recommend opening up the airbox and disconnecting the pipe because it's easier that way. I'll show you just now. The intake is off. You'll notice that one actually had to tackle from the top. I loosened it from the back, but then I tackled it from the top, just with a normal spanner, coming in at an angle and going bit by bit. Oh, I mentioned this before. I'm actually not going to try to pull this one off. I'm just going to leave it to the side. That is the inside of it, so I'm just going to leave it on. It's not really necessary for me to take it off for this, so I can just put it aside. I've also obviously disconnected the battery. But yeah, let's go ahead and take off the piping here. Just to clarify, you got your clamp here, take that off. I'd leave it on here, to be fair, and I'd leave pretty much everything here alone. Just undo that clamp there, so you can take this off, including that. And yeah, as I said, keep your bolts in the right place. These are all the same size bolts that hold the airbox in, so that's okay. But yeah, carrying on. Okay, so the intake and the airbox are off. You've got the other side of the top of the airbox here. Just be careful again with your sensor and just leave this pipe alone. I'll kind of just pull it to the side. You can also see the intake of the turbo and the impeller. So what you need to do now is loosen this heat shield. This is also going to need to be loosened, so get some spray on here, just let it soak for a while. You don't want to strip any bolts or anything, so give it a second to go. This is your diesel line. Leave that alone. Be careful not to spray too much Q20 and drip it on your alternator like I have accidentally. My stream went soft all of a sudden and it fell onto the alternator. Not the best thing you can do, so yeah, just be careful of that, please. If anything, I think put something over it, the alternator that is. Alright, so we now have that removed, the heat shield. Guys, please be careful with those bolts. They are small bolts, but damn, they're not easy to get out, eh? So give it some time, lots of spray. Get them nice and, penetrating into the threads so you can get it out. We are now trying to undo that and those 2 here. Again, lots of spray here. Like I said, lots of spray. That one's giving me a bit of trouble. Now, obviously, sorry, I forgot to mention this. There is another bolt at the back there. So you got the 3. So to reach that, the bracket does need to come off at the top. So take that off for now. and please let them soak. This bolt, by the way, just to show you, is quite a long one that came out of there. Put it somewhere you know where it goes. I tend to always put my bolts back into the places they need to go if possible. So yeah, let them sit a bit. Like this one came out. Both of these are not coming out easily. I undo them a little bit, spray inside so that the Q20 has time to run in, and then I give it a bit of a while and carry on. And guys, if you have very difficult bolts, right? So I just did this now, but just to show you, if you're getting to a point where you can't loosen it, right? So this one's loosening quite easily now. It wasn't. Even after it lifted, it got to a point where it was getting really tough. Just click it back, just give it like a bit of a turn, close again, and back open, and make sure you spray so that Q20 can get into the threads, right? Don't try to force it further when it's difficult. Rather go a bit, tighten it a little bit more. You'll often notice that the Q20 will then, if you already sprayed through it in there, it will then run down, and then it just becomes a lot easier because you don't want to snap the head off the bolt. So yeah, just a little bit of advice. The top bracket is off, it's at the bottom there. I'm putting my bolts in again where they need to be, just to keep them now. Also, I've got that other bolt removed now for the third bolt. Yay. Again, spray a lot, give it time, be patient. That's the hardest part of this whole job, is getting these bolts at the back. So it's going to be difficult to show. There's a bolt, right? It's a bit unclear, but follow the tip of my finger. There's a bolt down there, right? And then at the bottom here, I can't put my phone in there. Feel around with your pinky. So put your hand underneath there. You'll feel another bolt that is going to be close to where my pinky is, right? It's going to be the other part. Well, the top bolt here is obviously the first connecting part, and the bottom bolt is the second. It'll look, well, it'll have to be fit this, right? So you can imagine bolts like that, okay? Top, bottom. Now, let's get them out first. Just to show you that that is where the extension goes, so it gives you a bit of a place to gauge. I can't really show you from that angle, but that is my extensions coming out there. That's the top one. Alright, so now this is loose, both sides. That was by far the most difficult part of this job. Some advice I used, well, to get the leverage to undo them, I had to use the 1/2 inch, but I would very much recommend getting either a long socket or just a smaller extension, because the usual size extension was just too long, and mind you, the bendy one did work fairly well. The top one wasn't so much of the issue, but the bottom one is, especially because, I mean, these are the two bolts that come out, and you don't want to drop them. So I went from, the bigger socket to the smaller one, just to make sure that it stays in there. It's a mission, to be honest, but yeah, not so bad. Now, what you do want to do is, I mean, you can pull that apart, and slide the blocking plate on. Same for the bottom. I was advised to very much do the bottom one first and then the top one, otherwise there's going to be some issues. And then we'll head to the actual valve next, which is not that difficult. Okay, so now that blocking plate is in. I don't suggest putting the bolts in yet. Make sure your gasket is aligned though. Mine is not that aligned, so I'm gonna have to lift it up and just make sure it lines up properly with the gasket. But at this point in time, we'll use some leverage, so I'm just using the extender bar to pry it to the side to put the other plate in. And once that's done, I'll make sure that everything here lines up. That should obviously be lined up ready because it goes onto bolts. You now see the one backing plate's in. Blocking plates, what I keep saying backing plates now. Let's see. make sure this goes back in its place there. And now line this up properly, and then good to go with the bolts. Right, so we got these 3 bolts in again. Make sure they're nice and tight. Don't over tighten them, please. Just make them nice and snug. Now the horror show of the back 2 begins. So to be honest, getting these bolts back on is very difficult, the bottom one especially. So I use my magnet stick torch thing, right? I position it, I can see the light from the other side, especially from the bottom. The top one should be easier, but the bottom one was a real hassle. So thankfully these trucks, utes, buckies, whatever you want to call them, don't really have an underfloor, so when something drops, it generally drops right down, which is fine. But this is by far the easiest method that I've found. Yeah, I know I got some success with just laying the bolts on the fingertips and shining a light from here so I can see what I'm doing, and then if the bolt kind of demonstrates, so if I was laying it down like this, and then let's say this was the edge of the thread, then I'd kind of push it onto the bolt and then turn it a little bit by little bit. But that's, yeah, you have danger of it falling down. Gotta find your own way. It's pretty difficult, but you get there. The unit is back in. Took a real while. The blocking plate is there. It's in here. This will never line up again. So obviously you lifted this unit up, therefore this will not line up. So free bolt, right? I'm going to install the side of the engine again, and I won't show that. It's just the reverse of what's done before, right? So just follow those steps, and then we'll head over to that side, which is a lot easier. A heads up, this heat shield is going to be pretty difficult to put back on because obviously everything is raised as well, right? So if you put the top on and the bottom ones are going to be difficult, but I do recommend putting the top one in first, because then what I did is I stood from the top and I pushed it down, held it down, and threaded that one in. It did take a couple of times. This one was a bit more easy, obviously, after the bottom one is in, but it does go back on. It's just not easy. Alright, so everything's back together. Well, besides the intercooler, of course. Gonna start on the other side now. This is the unit, right? This is the actual recirculating unit. So first thing you do, just unclip the sensor. Careful with the lines. Now just a bit of a hint, just undo the dipstick so you can move it a bit out of the way. There are going to be 4 bolts around here, so 1 there. Oh, it's going to be difficult to show. I can't see. Hold on. Sorry, guys. There's one. Yeah. Then we have the ones at the bottom. So there's one, and on the other side, there's one. Okay, so you have 4 bolts to unscrew. Get them nice and soaking wet with Q20 first. Just to show, it's not actually giving that much space, right? But you can now move it. So if you need to move it, you can move it a bit out of the way if you need some space. So it just gives you about a centimeter, less, half a centimeter, but every inch counts, eh? Okay, so here's the module. Came out like this. It's a bit sticky, so let them soak a bit. And there are your 2 gaskets hanging off the bolt. So it's 2 nuts at the top and 2 bolts at the bottom. Right, so you can see how they're hanging. Put on the backing plate, put this back in same position, plug in the switch. Make sure to plug in the switch. Do not turn on your car, bucky, ute, truck, whatever you want to call it, without that switch being plugged in. Please, obviously, put the intercooler back on. See, there's quite a lot of build up on the side. There you can actually see how thick it is, right? Look, it's quite, call it 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters thick. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, or as others have been, but it's still pretty shit.